When I came to the Lower East Side, the war was about to end. It was amazing to be in a community of mixed ethnic people, black, white, Hispanic, Jewish, Italian, Ukrainian, you name it. We were all there, and as long as you were nice, people were nice to you. I never felt so happy in my life as I did on the Lower East Side. But in 1959, Robert Moses decided to take over my area of the Lower East Side, Cooper Square, and have it declared an urban renewal project. And we started to fight the urban renewal plan because it would destroy our neighborhood. Robert Moses' legacy was as a master builder and planner. And he was like God when it came to planning. He was tremendously powerful and commanded the kind of money from developers and builders that he was beyond reproach. So way back, 50 years ago, Cooper Square started, and I was up to my neck in politics of community activism. What I loved most about that struggle was our bedrock basic contention, which is that in Cooper Square, urban renewal considered that the people who lived there would be the beneficiaries and not the victims of urban renewal. That was it. That was the difference between our urban renewal plan and every other urban renewal plan. When Robert Moses came to the Lower East Side, we were ready. We were really ready for him. Boy, did he pick the wrong neighborhood. It took us 50 fucking years to win, but we won.
Cultures put together in one thought, a clash. The result of that clash put together in one thought. Bang. Lower East Side, Lower Finder.
I grew up on the Lower East Side. The building I grew up in, we had 13 different nationalities in one building. And the building only had like 25 apartments. People always helped each other, even though they didn't speak the same language. Because one thing people understood is that we were all poor. There was a sense of family. You know, people used to live with their doors open to their house. People slept out in the fire escape. We would have parties up on the roof.
I was born in Italy. I came here at age 12 or 13. The Lower East Side was, from the get-go, a working class community. It was not, one big happy family. It was not a melting pot, so-called. But it was a community of many cultures. They could come, they could practice their religion, they could have their political beliefs, anywhere from extreme left to extreme right. You could do that with impunity without, people beating up on you.
There were an enormous amount of artists, because artists are poor. The writers and the dancers and the singers and the actors flooded to the Lower East Side and made it a very vibrant community because they plied their trade. They danced and they sang and they made movies and they made plays and they acted in them. 30% of our people are artists in Cooper Square.
My parents actually met on this block. My family has been here since the late 60s, early 70s. And when I came home from the hospital, I actually came home to 67 East 4th Street. That's where my grandmother lived. I think that growing up around all of the community organizing, even though I wasn't personally involved, I witnessed it. I really do think that I saw history in the making.
This is 225 is very soon, right here. This big building, 225. That's where I moved into when I came to the Lower East Side. It used to be the St. Mark's bookstore. People came from every country to the St. Mark's bookstore. The tenants in Cooper Square were taught, you don't fight for your home, you're gonna lose it. In this neighborhood, we don't just do nothing when we see an injustice. It's in the air that we breathe on the Lower East Side to fight back, and it's exactly where I belong. My family were Russian Jews, left to escape pogroms and oppression. I was born on June 22nd, 1924, in my mother's bed in Springfield Gardens, Queens. My parents were both Russians from the Ukraine, and I was their fourth and last child. We lived in an area which was Christian, and of the 9 Jews, 8 were shopkeepers. And we were shunned by the Christians and shunned by the Jews because my father went to work and came home in overalls. It was not considered upper class by them. When I was about 11, I had very few friends. I felt pretty isolated. But I had one friend who had a sister whom I couldn't stand, nor she me. And somehow on the way home from school, we got into a fight. And then a circle of boys surrounded the fight, and they were yelling, "Kill the Jew, kill the Jew." And when they said that, I went berserk. And I grabbed the child's ears, and I was banging her head against the curb until somebody was on my back saying, "Francis, please stop, she has a heart condition." And I looked up, and on the porch of my house, which was a half block away, I saw my father standing. And I kind of came to my senses and got up and staggered home. He took me inside and put me on his lap and rocked me. And I was beside myself that he exposed me to that and didn't stop it. And he said, "Girlie, girlie," which is his term of affection. He said, "This was your fight, not mine. You had to have this fight, and you'll never have to fight again." At the time, I didn't understand that, but it turned out to be true. I never did have to fight again. Except I've been fighting all my life, but not that kind of fight. I got married at 20 and moved to the Lower East Side and found Nirvana. I was married to a wonderful guy, Morris Golden, who was 12 years older than I, very well educated, knew the history of the United States and of the Communist Party. He was a communist, a member of the party. I became one under his tutelage. I was an empty vessel. When he met me, I was a pretty face and nothing else. I sat at his knee and he mentored me and he taught me and he educated me. And I absorbed it like a sponge. I just found it so interesting.
The Lower East Side at the beginning of the 20th century was the center of radical activity. This is the place where the tenant movement was born. It was the birthplace of the Socialist Party, the Communist Party, and then later the Ladies' Garment Workers Union, which also was rooted in the Lower East Side. The Communist Party was accepted in the working class as a part of the working class. People could disagree with it. They could disagree with its alliance with the Soviet Union, its ideology, and even its politics. But it was an accepted part of political life in the city.
What it meant to be a communist in the early days of my being a member of the party was carrying out the tradition of the earlier communists who wanted to make our country more equitable. I knew the history of the party. I knew that blacks in the South and whites throughout the country gave their lives in order to make changes. My area was housing, and the party made sure that rents were kept low. And we learned to be better organizers because of the history of successes of the party in the past.
Paint peeling off my wall, dirt piling in the hall, ice on the pipes but no steam at all. Landlord, landlord, that low down rotten good for nothing.
People were being evicted because they didn't have money. Not that they weren't good tenants. And the marshals would come and take mothers and fathers and babies and grandmothers and put them on the street with all of their belongings. Within an hour, we would put it back in the apartment. We would break the lock that the marshals had affixed to the door, and we'd stand outside once they were back in to protect them. It was exhilarating. We couldn't wait to do it. You know, this is what you do when you're a communist. You serve the people. That's what Che said. That's what Lenin said. That's what I said. I was a good student. It seems to me it should be under F. Here's the original. At the time that I joined the Communist Party, and until I left it, we were being targeted by the FBI very seriously. It's why I had to work to support the family, because my husband was blacklisted for so long. He eventually was able to get a job, but life was very difficult when I was married and had 2 babies. My husband was the head of the American Labor Party. The relationship of the Communist Party and the American Labor Party was a close one. I think it was in 1950 or 51. They asked me to run on the ALP ticket for state senate. They needed a woman on the ticket, and I was a pretty hotshot organizer on the Lower East Side for housing, and I did. And I'm so proud to say that the head of my ticket was Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, who was running for U.S. Senate. To me, it was obvious that he was the preeminent intellectual in the country. He was articulate. He was revered. It was like I had died and gone to heaven that I'd be on a ticket with Du Bois. You know, I had just read Souls of Black Folks, and I was carried away by the brilliance and the impressiveness of his words. And I never went to college. I mean, I got my education from my husband and from the struggle. Du Bois got 10% of the vote, and I got 14%. And the difference was that the women in Stuyvesant Town voted for the only woman on the slate. And a lot of the old Jewish men and women said, Frances, she got me a painting, you know. She reduced my rent. So they knew me, and that was the element that resulted in the added 4%. I was beginning to have conflict with the leaders of the Communist Party because they wanted me out of housing and into education. And I wouldn't do that. I was getting more and more information about housing, and it's something I wanted to do. I was not about to leave that. And I was really being pushed, and I quit. I became more independent. I became more of an organizer. I became more of a leader.
How are you, Commissioner? Nice to see you again, sir.
Robert Moses was a kind of czar. He was the czar of public or quasi-public development in New York City, beginning in the 1930s. When I call him a czar, I'm trying to capture the idea of somebody who's very aggressive. He's not just entrepreneurial. You couldn't cross Moses. The name Moses was legendary among city planners, and not in a good way. He was a kind of devil who could get anything done. A political fixer, maker, dealer, wizard, manipulator, in the interest of building.
He, at one time, had a score of different appointments. He was Parks Commissioner, he was head of highways, he was involved in terms of urban renewal and planning within the city of New York, and literally had amassed powers that no elected official had ever acquired. And he did it in a way that he was literally unaccountable to either the mayor or to the governor.
Robert Moses wanted to see how this city could move faster and better and more efficiently. The people didn't move him a bit. He was responsible for the Cross Bronx Expressway, which destroyed 25,000 families in the Bronx. the families that lost their apartments were never compensated for that.
Today, our greatest single problem is tenant removal. That is moving people and business establishments out of the way of these great arterial improvements. I know it takes a good deal of persistence and courage and stubbornness, and in the long run, citizen support, but I think that we have the talents and the ability and the guts to do the job.
Cooper Square was in an area of the city between the Civic Center and the 14th Street Commercial District. It was in Lower Manhattan. It was an area perceived by Moses and planners as having a great deal of economic value.
If you look at a map of Lower Manhattan, you see all these high-rise buildings around Wall Street, and then you look further north and you see, Madison Avenue. And in between, you have something that looks like nothing is there because these are low-rise buildings. A perfect bedroom community for people working on Wall Street or Midtown, except for the unfortunate circumstance of working-class people living here.
It was also in the pathway between New York and New Jersey.
So Robert Moses, he had a dream that he could change the neighborhood by an urban renewal plan. And by the time people became aware of it, it would already have been implemented.
The urban renewal plan for Cooper Square would have leveled the existing buildings in the 12-block area, and through the use of eminent domain, would have transferred ownership to new developers.
Moses wanted to take 2,400 units out of our neighborhood for housing that was much more expensive than people could afford. So we took on the job of defeating Moses on 2 projects. He had 2 big plans. Build a thruway from the Hudson River to the East River and get rid of everything from 9th Street to Delancey Street.
Had both those been accomplished, New York City as we know it would not have existed. The areas that we now know as Tribeca, as Little Italy, as the Lower East Side would have been ripped apart.
The Lower Manhattan Expressway, only practical highway crossing serving the Lower Manhattan commercial and business districts. It will unsnarl the jam, revitalize business. It will directly benefit more than 450,000 vehicles daily. And as the area improves, it will bring new jobs and employment. The need is urgent. We must have a Lower Manhattan Expressway now.
The first reaction by the community organizers, led by Fran Golden, was, no way. This is not going to happen. We're not here to beg. We're here to stop it.
I knew nothing about Robert Moses, nothing. I mean, I got kicked out of high school. My world was from Delancey Street to 14th Street. That was my world. That was it. That was my whole world. I learned about class struggle through housing organizing. It wasn't Marx, it wasn't Engels, it wasn't Lenin, it wasn't all these political philosophers. It was housing that I learned about class struggle, because the reality was this was class struggle at its worst.
in my more naive years, I used to think that urban renewal was a good idea, but just that the way it was implemented, it was misguided because certain people were hurt by urban renewal. It only a little bit later on I realized that intrinsic to urban renewal is urban removal. It's not simply a matter of tearing down derelict buildings that need to be replaced with new housing. It's to replace poor people with a higher economic class of people.
Urban renewal was promoted by big city mayors who wanted to reclaim the inner city slums for prosperous tax-paying residents and businesses. So it was not necessarily the worst slums that got renewed. Urban renewal was predatory. It took a while for people to realize it. It took a while for people to organize against it.
You have to move a lot of people out of the way of a big housing project or a slum clearance project. A lot of them are not going to like it. Many of them are misinformed. Many of them in the end come around to feel that you've done them a great service. And, but in the process, if there is somebody to excite them, to steam them up, there's somebody that is a ringleader, you get a terrific amount of criticism.
By then I had a little experience with urban renewal. My first experience was with Lincoln Center, which I lost. And then they built Seward Park down on Lower East Side, and we fought that and lost. We learned that you don't go in and fight and say, go away, bad, bad, bad. We went in and said, we want urban renewal, but we want it to benefit the people in the neighborhood, not victimize them. At that point, the Cooper Square Community Development Committee and Businessmen's Association, that shows you how backward we were then, we said Businessmen's Association, was formed. We joined with Little Italy, we joined with churches, we joined with Jane Jacobs and the West Village, and there was Esther Rand, and there was Thelma Burdick, who was the director of the Church of All Nations, and there was Staunton Lind, who was a history professor turned community organizer, and we just got together.
Cooper Square's struggle was unique because they took the initiative to develop their own ideas about what they wanted to see in those 12 blocks. And maybe it was having Walter Thabit available, who was a trained planner. Nobody did this. This was new territory, this kind of advocacy work with community and neighborhood groups.
I met Walter in 1959, and he was a down-and-out advocate planner. He worked for the planning department in New York, and he realized just what controlled the city, which was real estate and big money and corporations. I felt I was the most radical person in the world, but when it came to not trusting the city, he beat us all. And he kept us on track by not trusting the city. And soon after he came to Cooper Square, he wanted to know what the neighborhood consisted of, and he did a survey from 9th Street to Delancey Street of a representative sampling of tenants to determine if they could afford the Moses plan or not. 93% could not afford the rents and the buy-in for the co-ops. 7% could, and we threw our lot with the 93%. Housing was mean, it was poor. There were toilets in the hall and bathtubs in the kitchen. It was the old law tenements. And we're telling them that we're there to save their buildings and that they would not be kicked out and that the city wanted to tear down this area. And either you fight for your apartments or you're out of here in the street. They were very poor people. That's all they had. They couldn't find another apartment that cheaply. But they came from countries where they were oppressed. They would fight back, they would organize. It was like in the soil.
The Lower East Side had one other thing going for it. It was really a mixed-income, multiracial community. They were willing to sacrifice some of their housing conditions for some of the social interaction that was maintained there. And it was really that which made it significantly different than other places.
Well, one day a friend of mine was telling me, yeah, man, I got a good apartment. At that time, it was $20 to $50 a room. That came out to $67.50 a month. So the woman who was part of Cooper Square, she took me up. We looked in the bathroom. There was this huge dead rat. And she said, I don't know if you want this apartment. I said, give me the key. I'll take the rat out myself, you know. I moved in. I finally had a place that was mine, and I could, you know, make art in it. I felt at home. I felt like this was my community.
I live on East 4th Street, and I have been there for 35 years. I was thrilled to be able to find an apartment that I could afford. And then I moved into a neighborhood that was like a little village, which is the kind of place that I always felt, being in the US, that I would have liked to raise my children. Near some of my supports, my friends in particular, and Hispanic area, you know.
I think that Robert Moses, as his next urban renewal project, didn't do any history of that neighborhood. He never would have picked Cooper Square, because it had this radical base.
Years later, I thought about it, and I said, you know, I wanted to get heat and hot water, and what I came out with was a worldview that it's not just about housing. It's about building the institutions that we need to keep these communities alive and prosperous.
When Cooper Square was born, we got no funding. We just got $1 a year from our members. But as we grew, and as we got a planner, we realized we need that planner full-time, and that was Walter Thabit. And eventually, we were dubbed the official organization to represent the community. And we received money from the city in that regard. What we did was present an alternate plan to the city's plan to wipe out the neighborhood. It took us 1 year. We had over 100 meetings in 1 year. And we fought over every word because we were a bunch of tough community people. And we would tear it apart. This is not the right building, it's that building, you know. But it resulted in an amazing plan.
There was a lot on the north and south sides of Houston Street between 2nd Avenue and the Bowery that was part of the urban renewal area as originally designated.
The vacant lot on Houston Street was to be developed for public housing. Even though the Cooper Square Committee didn't own the land, people became conscious of the fact that that land was an integral part of their community and that they needed to plan for the future of that. That's what community planning is about. It's all about gaining control over the land in your community.
And our theory was that if you start with a very large vacant lot, you can build a house, and then 1st and 2nd and 3rd Street could move into that building, and then First and Second and Third Street would come down because it was now empty of people. New housing would be built there. People from 4th and 5th and 6th Street would move into the 1st and 2nd and 3rd Street buildings. And by checkerboarding that way, no one would be dislocated. They would move from their old crummy tenement into new gorgeous housing, and you could rebuild Cooper Square. I'll never forget printing the damn thing. First of all, it was beautiful, and it was in color. We stayed up all night printing the plan with a lithograph machine. And then one of the people got on his bicycle and went downtown and delivered it to all the offices in the city and the mayor and everybody. And it felt like a lead balloon. Nobody responded to it. We had this wonderful plan, and nobody said a word about it. It took us, I think, 6 or 7 months to wake the city up to the fact that we're not going to go away. We're not going to stop shoving and pushing and pulling. And they had to begin to respond to us. When you're dealing with a roof over a family's head, they either step up to the plate or give up. And we said, if you want to save your homes, we're going to have a big meeting at the church, and you've got to come to that meeting. And they came to that meeting. Or we're going to knock on the doors of everybody in your building, and we're going to have a meeting in the lobby. I know it's hard, but you've got to come to the City Planning Commission. Here's shirts. It says, save our homes. You've got to come to these meetings. Send your husband, send your daughter. You can go to work, but you got to have a body there. From the very beginning, they learned that if they weren't going to be part of it, it wasn't going to work. And they were a part of it.
I have pictures of my grandmother going to demonstrations and cousins and aunts holding signs and walking in marches and that sort of thing. It's kind of neat to know that that's in my legacy. And if you have any understanding of what the real estate market is like in New York City, then you know that a group of people from the Lower East Side, small community, took on Goliath.
It was a bloody struggle. Nothing was easy. They kept putting roadblocks in our path. When there was a roadblock, we had to overcome it. That meant a picket line, a sleep-in, a demonstration, and each time we upped the ante. Each time we got more angry and we got more radical. We also learned how to deal with the media. So we always did more outrageous things that would attract the media to cover our problem.
We organized our tenants here and we took them to the city office. First we put glue on the door of the city office lock.
And when the workers came to get in, someone had jammed the locks. We have no idea who, but they couldn't get in. The door had to be taken out.
We said, time to clean up the neighborhood. We encouraged everybody to take their garbage and dump it in front of the city office.
Usually we bring bags full of dead mice and rats and stuff to City Hall. If it meant getting arrested, if it meant going to jail, if that's what we had to do to save Cooper Square, we did it. It was a deep, dark secret. Very few people knew about it. I met Walter Thabit, and then here he was with Cooper Square in his lap, and I was part of that package. And before long, we were intimate. And that is what destroyed the marriage. It was not Morris. He was guiltless. It was me. Morris was a wonderful guy. He was a great father. He was brilliant. He brought me up from nothing and made me a mensch. I felt badly because Morris was very much in love, and I wish I had loved him as much as he loved me. He deserved better. But I had to do it. I don't regret it. We woke up one day to find that the city had taken our vacant land, which was the basis for our plan succeeding on Houston Street, and given it to Louis DeSalvio, who was our state assemblyman, for the San Gennaro Association, which was an Italian Catholic organization. Robert Moses, he wrote to DeSalvio, Cooper Square. They've got a big site on Houston Street, and they want to build public housing on that site. But I'll give it to you for the San Gennaro Association to build middle-income housing if you support the expressway. And so we fought it. We went to the Board of Estimate every bloody month and begged for our land back. I get at the mic and I say, this land belongs to us. We are not leaving until we get our block back. We can't do Cooper Square without this block. And then Don Elliott said, Miss Golden, you've made your point, now sit down. And I said, I'm not sitting down. I'm not leaving until we get this block back. And he said, we'll take it under advisement, leave. I'll leave when you give us back our land. So he said, Miss Golden, if you don't leave, you'll have to be arrested. And they pull me, which makes the microphone come out, right? Because I'm not letting go. And so it comes out and the table topples and I'm taken off to jail. And as soon as I leave, a guy named Ernesto Martinez, he was a real great organizer. So he gets up and he says, I'm here to reiterate Miss Golden's demand that this land be given to Cooper Square. And they said, Mr. Martinez, this matter is resolved. And he says, I'm not leaving. You've got to give this land back to Cooper Square. At which point, the troopers come and begin to take him. And my daughter and 8 other people rush to save Ernesto. And they grab a hold of him. And the cops are pulling him one way. And the kids are pulling him another way. 9 people at that point were arrested. And Don Elliott says, okay, I now call Mr. Williams from Brooklyn. And the guy gets up. Now, he doesn't know us from a hole in the wall, but he has sat through this whole turmoil and all of these arrests. And he gets up and he goes to the mic and he says, I yield to Cooper Square. Can you imagine? The next month, we got our land back. It was a wonderful feeling. This was a tiny organization. But when we defeated Robert Moses, we felt like giants. We felt if we could get rid of that son of a bitch, we could do anything.
Thank you. Mr. Nixon, you've been saying in this campaign that under your government, you wouldn't pour billions of dollars into programs that aren't working. I wonder if you'd be more specific and tell us which programs you'd repeal.
I'm referring, for example, to many of the poverty programs, particularly the Job Corps program. I'm referring to some of the approaches to public housing, and I'm referring
in the late 1960s, There are really big changes afoot in Washington, D.C. And those changes have to do at the outset and fundamentally with a kind of backlash against the 1960s and the importance of the Black freedom movement.
A new voice that is being heard across America today. It is not the voice of a single person. It's the voice of a majority of Americans. And now that voice is going to sweep across America, and it's going to drown out the voices of those that would destroy America.
A Republican Party strategy emerges and uses popular animosity, racial animosities, white animosities toward blacks and toward the poor, and uses that to promote an agenda of tax cuts, deregulation, safety net cuts. Housing cuts are included in the safety net cuts.
In 1971, the city acquired a number of properties on East 3rd, East 4th Street, 2nd Avenue, Stanton Street, for the purpose of implementing the first phase of the Cooper Square alternate plan.
But then life catches up with us, and Richard Nixon, when we're about to build, cancels public housing. We have no more public housing. Then we were going to be funded by the state. Then the state went belly up.
The city was on the verge of bankruptcy. There was a response the city had at that point in time that was very ominous. And the city decided to undertake a form of triage, or what New York City called planned shrinkage.
The city is facing a fiscal crisis. We don't have money to take care of everybody. Who do you help? You help the better off neighborhoods, like in Queens and in Brooklyn and so on, and you let natural processes take care of the rest.
City leaders essentially cut back services in neighborhoods, and particularly low-income, working-class neighborhoods. Communities of color were the ones who suffered.
We suffered losses of over 25% in police and fire protection, which meant that before you knew it, we had a drug crisis, with drug dealing becoming rampant.
Back then, everybody was strung out on heroin. If you lived during that time, you saw it. I mean, grandmothers were shooting up. I mean, it was awful. It was terrible. The landlords would allow drug dealings to go on in the buildings so that the tenants would move out. It was a dangerous situation for tenant organizers.
It was a very hard period because the city was taking off their gloves and they were being very aggressive about destroying this neighborhood. They decided that they wouldn't pick up the garbage 3 times a week. They would do it once or twice a week. So the place would become a pig pen.
That coincided with a period of housing abandonment. There was a massive movement of industry, deindustrialization. The areas that had significant industrial concentrations, and that included portions of the Lower East Side, they lost the industrial working class with them.
People were being displaced through the abandonment process. The private owners could no longer maintain the buildings, the tenants couldn't pay the rent, and it was devastating.
The city tried to move tenants from one building into another building and then tried to demolish that building. We fought them in court. We said, you know, housing is a major need. How can they be tearing down buildings when there's no new housing being built?
We had an increase in arson. A lot of it was due to either deteriorated buildings or because owners of buildings had only one way out, and so we had arson for profit. We were losing 30 to 36,000 apartments a year. That's equivalent to 5 or 6 buildings a week being bombed.
There are areas that look like we've had a recent war with burnt out dwellings and communities that you dare not walk through. The tenants are left in a situation that has been created, and there's a general deterioration.
Under urban renewal, you're required by law to notify the affected tenants that they're about to be evicted. It's a lengthy and costly process. Here, it doesn't cost the city anything, or the landlords, with planned shrinkage applied to the urban context.
The city wound up in the 1980s as the de facto owner of a lot of abandoned buildings. In comes Ed Koch as mayor. Koch's policy was to get rid of them as soon as possible. He is the public spokesman for the idea that the injection of new capital is going to save the city. So you had these insane auctions of vacant land and buildings, and they would go to speculators who very often would buy up vacant properties, speculate, sit on them, and wait until land values go up. It's disaster capitalism at its worst. So there are lots that got auctioned off by the city and then came back in city ownership because they went into tax arrears and the city wound up being owner of the lot once again.
The economic forces are so powerful that even though we're putting out fires and trying to stop evictions, running ourselves ragged, we'd be working to 11, 12 o'clock at night, 7 days a week. We'd be, we were young, we believed.
It was a life struggle, We might lose this, we might lose that, but damn it, we're going to succeed in Cooper Square.
This is me and Mundo putting up a sign on Delancey Street that says, this land is our land, so that the people that are coming to the bridge could see it.
I saw the urgency to become involved with these people that were already organized. And effectively had been fighting City Hall and the destiny that they were supposed to have. And I wanted to be part of it.
It was an uphill battle the entire time, but we never gave up. Most people can't wait that long to get something done. We were very lucky that we kept up the energy for all these years. Any victory, we celebrated. If there was the smallest little victory, we had a party.
Frances knows with every cell in her body that organizing has to be fun. If you just look at the photos of Frances in action, chances are she'll be wearing a floppy purple hat.
I should ask her why she wears purple all the time. Looks nice on her.
Or turquoise, preferably with sequins flashing. Or the emphasis she puts on having food at community events.
We never had a meeting without food, ever. Part of that is because I'm a Jewish mother, and Jewish mothers are supposed to feed people. Ess mein Kind, that means eat my child. So we had food. Food is so important. It's a wonderful organizing tool.
The other thing I want to mention about Frances, she's a great salsa dancer. Fantastic. I just laugh when I dance salsa with her, because she does all the turns and she's able to, just amazing.
I look for the oldest woman sitting there and moving in her chair, and that's the person I dance with. And she's dying to dance, but nobody asks that grandmother to dance, but I do. If I can't dance, it's not my revolution. Thank you, Emma Goldman.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Love Delegation.
In the 80s, anything east of 2nd Avenue was dangerous to most people. Not to me or not to the people who lived there, but most people. They didn't venture beyond 2nd Avenue. We viewed them as being sort of tourists, and they would gawk at us. They would gawk at the whole scene.
You will see people moving in that you didn't see them before.
Going to 84, 85, real, serious gentrification started occurring. Ironically, you could say that the crack dealing kept the neighborhood affordable. When they were gone, it didn't matter what kind of housing it was, it became desirable.
You saw a lot more students from, especially NYU. When you have a group of students moving into apartments to share the higher rents, landlords were much more willing to rent to those people because they move almost every year,
And then, of course, we had a proliferation of art galleries. Sometimes there were like 1 or 2 or 3 in each block, displacing small businesses. They were hit with astronomical rent increases, and they were gone and made more ripe for gentrification.
The end of the 1980s, early 1990s, there was a real estate boom. And that's when Koch's policy paid off, but it paid off for the investors. It didn't pay off for people in the communities because they had suffered through all of these years of abandonment, speculation, and then found themselves in the midst of gentrification.
More important than Robert Moses was the crushing power of the real estate market and the construction industry in pushing for the retaking, really, of the land and the buildings that had originally been occupied by the immigrant working class that settled in the Lower East Side.
Some of the commercial tenants that had been in the neighborhood, serving the neighborhood for a long time, started disappearing. The bodegas started disappearing and being replaced by delis. And they were not cheap delis.
People, who had more money were moving into the neighborhood and changing it. And then there were certain things that were no longer there.
The Orchidea restaurant in the mid-'80s, it was a Ukrainian-Italian pizzeria that catered to working class people and artists. If you couldn't afford to give you a free slice of pizza, okay? The landlord overnight raised the rent from $950 to $5,000 a month. We had people sign petitions, telling the landlord, my husband proposed to me here that night, you can't be so greedy.
I started to see more bars than church gatherings. Gentrification impacts everything, including the church, because that then changes who lives in the neighborhood and who attends.
There's a possibility that I could lose my apartment. So there was that threat.
The landlords would litigate the hell out of poor people that didn't know what the hell was going on, so they'd be evicted and lose their rent control apartments.
Lacking federal funding and having housing that was occupied by very low-income people, we knew we had a problem. We didn't have the money to renovate these buildings. We didn't have money for new construction. It caused us to again face the same question. We had the power to block, particularly a coalition of groups. We didn't have the money to build.
So we had to change our shift from public housing to housing that was no longer public housing. It meant that we had to have a task force that would figure out how to make Cooper Square work, which took 6 or 7 years of constant meetings. We worked around it. We got new ways of solving the problem. Our original plan had no luxury housing in it. But after 45 years, we knew that we could not complete the plan unless we continued to somewhat compromise. We swallowed hard and did it.
That's when we decided that we had to rethink the alternate plan for Cooper Square. And we produced a revised plan that gave something that the mayor wanted. We would allow the city to develop largely market rate housing on 2 vacant lots on the north and south side of Houston Street in exchange for at least 25% of those units to be low-income apartments, plus sufficient funding to renovate all the tenement buildings occupied by these low-income families. 21 buildings now, on 3rd Street and 4th Street, 2nd Avenue, and so on. We decided that we would have to take these old law tenements and turn them into beautiful new apartments. So we rolled up our sleeves and we pressed against the city and said, you did this to us. You're going to save us by renovating every damn apartment in Cooper Square. We're going to give us 3-piece bathrooms in every apartment. You're going to give us hardwood floors, new refrigerators and stoves. We're going to have spanking new kitchens, and you're going to pay for it. And they said, that's what you think. And we said, that's what you think.
Over the long term, there was a very strong desire to avoid what they saw happening in other parts of the neighborhood, city buildings becoming privatized. They wanted to see the housing preserved for the people who were living there at that time.
We looked at European models, we looked at national models, and that's where we came up with the idea of a mutual housing association. Mutual housing association takes up the notion of a cooperative, but extends it to many buildings. Not one building with 15 families, but 21 buildings with 350 families. I think we were very lucky to have Marty Berger as our lawyer, because it was Marty Berger who said, if you don't do this with a community land trust, it's not going to be permanently low income. You have to have a community land trust, which we didn't even know what that was.
The community land trust purchased the land from the city and owns the land underneath our buildings. We, as shareholders, own the buildings, but we lease the land from the community land trust.
If you're going to buy, an apartment that I have, for example, and you're going to pay me $500,000, any lawyer will tell you the first thing that you want from me is clear title. Well, the moment they do a title search, they're going to find out that the building is owned by the MHA, but the land is owned by another entity, the Cooper Square Community Land Trust. 2/3 of the people on the board of the MHA have to be tenants. 1/3 have to be community land trust. From the beginning, our members
made the decisions. They'll never sell the buildings. It'll never go private. And if the MHA, for some reason, decide to change that, we can say to them, okay, you really want to vote to sell the buildings? Okay, you own the buildings. We own the land. I think you're making a big mistake. Take your buildings and go. What do you mean, take my buildings? Well, do you understand that we own the land? You own the building. Take your building and sell it for a profit, but we own the land. You can't be on this land. We own the land. Well, we can't take the building elsewhere. Ah, now you get it. You can't take the building elsewhere, which means you can't sell it for a profit. From Wagner on, we met with every mayor because the plan started in 1959. The only one who followed through from beginning to end was Dinkins. David Dinkins held a meeting at City Hall in which he approved the moving forward of the alternate plan for Cooper Square.
Those buildings were city-owned, and they finally agreed to transfer title to the MHA and the CLT.
We got a special deal. We bought the buildings for $1 a piece, with the commitment that the houses remain affordable in perpetuity.
Cooper Square was the pioneer, the first to do a formal community plan and to fight for its implementation from beginning to end.
We got the city to take 400 apartments and turn them into modern buildings. That cost $50,000 an apartment, which the city spent because they were forced to by us forcing them, and they did it.
It took us like about 10, 12 years to finish the renovation. The last building was renovated about 2003, 2004. Yeah, it's about right. Around half of the buildings have storefront space. The commercial income that's collected is pooled and used for the benefit of all the buildings. So they all get a portion of the commercial income.
Once they had been renovated and they were in structurally sound condition, they were turned over to the Cooper Square Mutual Housing Association and the Cooper Square Land Trust.
Francis Golden. She was here at the beginning.
We're trying to figure out the word. This is a momentous occasion. It's a historic occasion. What did you say? Transcendental? It's all of those things. It's an amazing night. But before I say a word, look around, folks. Look at your neighbors. Look at them. You'll not find a group like this anywhere in the city. And because we're all together, we're celebrating this victory tonight. We're doing it to show the city that a community can save itself, not make a buck on it, but be able to pay our bills, to go to work or to go to college, to raise our children because of this unique plan that we have a paper tonight, which you're going to take days to read, where if you sign on, we will have a co-op. So we will say to those guys who come down the street with a clipboard in suits, and you say, what are you doing on this block? This block is not for sale. Get the hell off 4th Street. This land is our land.
Yes, now we do.
The tenants in these buildings are going to become shareholders, and they're going to be able to purchase shares for a price of $250, not thousands of dollars, $250. But if they ever move out, all they get back is $250.
Own the building, and then you have the rights to this lease, and this is the terms of the lease and house rules. You're very welcome. Congratulations.
It's a non-profit co-op. What they get is control. They do not get to make a profit.
Original copy, and this is your stat certificate.
Oh my God. That is kind of impressive looking.
Well, you're an owner. That's how it works.
I'm so happy.
Nothing like this has happened in the state of New York, ever.
Free at last. We are co-ops.
The future of affordable housing, if we have any, will be the development of land trusts all over this country. There's no other way.
We're celebrating. We're celebrating.
People in this neighborhood could pay $1,500 for a studio easy. That's not even what people are paying for a 2-bedroom apartment when they're in the MHA.
What I take away from being part of the movement that's progressive, that had it not succeeded, the neighborhood would have disappeared. Had it not succeeded, I couldn't live there.
And look at all these nice faces, everybody's so happy. Man, 50 years, goddamn.
Our Cooper Square is going to remain permanently affordable. That means 99 years with a rollover for another 99 years. And after that, I'm not responsible.
I'm so excited.
I was with Walter for 45 years before he died, which was about 3 or 4 years ago. We never lived together until the end. It was an extremely long relationship. And it had its serious problems because of who he was. But it was still a very real connection. He loved women. He loved young, old, fat, thin, black, white, green. That was one of his problems. I was angry at him, and I was inextricably attached to him. I think his understanding of what made cities work and what he did for Cooper Square really endeared him in a way that I couldn't let go of. I miss him a lot.
¿Tu nombre es?
Yesenia.
Yesenia. Everything
is being taken over by corporate stuff, you know, fast food and all that, you know. It's the only Spanish food restaurant that in the neighborhood. And it's sad to say, back in the days, there used to be Spanish food all over, you know. I love the Lower East Side, man. Love it, you know. Puerto Rican, there you go.
We fought and we fought and we fought, but we lost thousands and thousands of affordable housing to the speculators. If we had developed the land trust 50 years ago, this couldn't have happened.
The harms done by Robert Moses shrink if you compare them to the harms done by Mayor Michael Bloomberg in the 21st century, where what's left of working class New York is ignored or demolished in favor of high-rise glass towers of offices or zillion-dollar condos. Ultimately, the Lower East Side was gobbled up, as most of Manhattan has now been gobbled up. There are two ways to look at the alternate plan. I think both are right. One way is that here was a remarkable achievement, that a network of community organizations held at bay the huge, indeed global forces of gentrification and urban growth in a global city.
And the rapid spread of alternative structures are steadily...
Help save the St. Mark's Bookshop, you know? Yeah.
And they even managed to carve out pieces for the community. That's the achievement of Cooper Square. But the other way to look at it is also true, and that is that it took such enormous energy. It took so many years. And in the end, the Lower East Side has been gentrified. Both things are true.
That it happened at all is kind of miraculous. I mean, we fought the bureaucracy of the city. We fought the big corporations that make money from doing things their way. And I think it's a shame that it should take 50 years to win this kind of a struggle. But there's nowhere in the city where the tenants who lived there wound up with 65% of the wealth in real estate. Anything purple? She's looking out for purple stuff for me. I think that's an accomplishment, and I'm proud of that accomplishment.
We're here for you guys. Without you, we can't be here.
I think we moved at the right time, at the right place, and it wasn't too late. Matty Berger, I think he would up in heaven be smiling about it because that was his objective. Same thing with Walter. God bless his soul.
It's so thrilling to know that if you join together and you struggle hard and cleverly and persistently, you can win.
You know why we're going to win this fight? You know why? Why? Because we don't give up. We don't give up.
I think that fighting back is a very life-giving force. And it's part of my nature. I don't know how to react any other way. You know, I'm so old, I can't change my style. I think that all these rallies and these sit-ins and these vigils is what keeps me alive. When you have meetings and you plan and you have demonstrations and you bombard the local police station and you do whatever you can do to make it better, you have hope.
So we're here from the East Harlem Community Land Trust, and we want to spread the word because we want residents to come together and talk about the future of the building. La meta es de preservar los apartamentos y los edificios para años y años, ¿no?
The Cooper Square Community Land Trust, that was bananas. When I actually went to see it, I was blown away.
The residents have control, the community has control, they have a lot of input.
Es buena cooperativa, para mí es bueno para el building.
Sí. We are having a meeting on the 25th, and I hope that you can attend, because we're going to talk about next steps for our campaign and pressuring the city to give us the money, right, to rehabilitate the building. And so it's an important meeting for everyone.